Today, it will not be the conventional panel discussion that we have been having over the last few days. Rather, today we will have a one-to-one conversation with a very special guest. A very special guest. She has been a nationally and an internationally acclaimed film critic and a film journalist. She has won the National Award in 2004 for the best film critic, and I'm sure you all would know her. Please welcome Namrata Joshi ji. So, ma'am, welcome to IFFB, Indian Film Festival of Bhubaneswar. It's our pleasure. Thank you. So, before opening up to the audience, we will do a little bit of question answer. I mean, it's obvious that usually film critics and film journalists, they interview filmmakers. There's a role reversal today.
Don't worry, I think I'll also counter question you in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, sure, we would love to. So, let me start from here. People, whenever I have interacted with media journalists and film critics, and I have asked them, why do you always cover mainstream? They say that we cover films which are more popular. But stubborn people like me, who are anti-mainstream, we feel that whatever media covers becomes popular. So it's a paradox. Which way is it?
Very interesting observation. See, I feel there was a certain point in time in the history of the country, in the way we were as a society, as people, when a lot of serious film writing was also happening, and cinema was. When I say cinema, let's just say what you're talking of as mainstream, what I say as Bollywood, was not regarded mainstream enough. And I think it's my whole years of kind of reading, newspapers and magazines, and eventually becoming a journalist myself. I have seen the shift happen. I do still remember how India Today was one of the first magazines which gave a lot of pride of place to Bollywood. An entity we've come to know as Bollywood. I remember them doing cover stories, and suddenly Bollywood became a cool thing to talk about as popular culture. After that, I find that over say last 10, 20 years, it used to occupy a space which was not the main paper. Main paper में Hindi cinema, mainstream cinema नहीं आएगा. But of late, I think the way it's got integrated is quite amazing, quite eye-popping rather. And when I say that, I mean, I'm not kind of just pointing a finger at my own tribe and saying that, oh, what have we done? Why have we done this? I mean, just look at our society, the way we are dressing, look at our marriages. I mean, all the wedding functions are about doing Bollywood set pieces, choosing Bollywood item numbers and dancing to it. So it's a part of a larger Bollywoodization of us as a society, us as a culture, us as a people, which has begun to reflect in the media as well. And I'm not, being... I'm not advocating that it should be the way it should be. I mean, if you are a lover of cinema, it's something that you don't feel happy about. You were talking about how your job is with Infosys, and then you make cinema out of passion. So for me, doing an interview with a Shah Rukh Khan or an Amir Khan is like the dal roti journalism for me. But yes, there is a larger passion for cinema which would make me perhaps look at, at some point in time, look at the Northeast cinema with a little more sense of engagement. I'm here for the festival, and I suddenly feel like talking to you guys about what's happening in Oriya cinema, and I'm dead certain I'm going to write a piece on it once I go back to Bombay. So it's a question of, being in a mainstream space, but how much of alternate can you bring in within those limitations? I'm not going to talk about a very idealistic zone where I'll only write about avant-garde cinema, it's not possible. But what I do feel responsible as a journalist is that if I interview 10 mainstream Bollywood stars, I should at least interview one young new voice in cinema. That's my way of kind of looking at the divide.
Thank you, ma'am. And I hope that other journalists get inspired by you. Because if everyone can do their bit, I think those one articles would sum up to a significant number.
Yesterday, I mean, sorry to interrupt you. Like yesterday, I was at this meet called The Huddle, which my newspaper, The Hindu, had organized in Bangalore, and where we had a very interesting panel discussion, on the topic was mainstreaming of parallel cinema, where we had Ratna Pathak Shah, we had Amit Masurkar, and we had Suhasini Mani Ratnam talk about cinema and is the parallel cinema finding inroads into the mainstream. And I think the one big point which really got thunderous applause from the audience, because there is a recognition of that. I mean, even in us as people, was when Ratna Pathak Shah pointed out about how Bollywood is becoming like, representative of cinema. It's not,
Absolutely.
And it's
I had a question exactly.
And even feature films are not representative of cinema, mind you. There are shorts, there are documentaries, there could be experimental
animations, there could be installations, there could be a lot of
so
things.
I mean, ideally we should be talking of a platform and a world where everyone coexists. There is a certain sense of democracy when it comes to the cinematic art form itself. But it is not like that. We have been bulldozed, and people who are on the periphery of it are also recognizing and are very angry about it, So let's see how we go from here. There is a certain recognition of it,
Right. I would take you to another angle. Considering the fact that we have media writing about or talking about mainstream cinema, which is by and large Bollywood, fortunately or unfortunately, and alternate cinema or avant-garde cinema or independent cinema or parallel cinema or off-beat cinema, whichever name you call it by. But in the tone of media coverage, there is a difference, which I personally feel. I may be wrong. Please pardon me if I'm wrong. Whenever there is a talk about mainstream cinema, there is a matter of hailing it. There's a matter of glorifying it. Whenever there's a talk about independent cinema, it is always an empathetic tone, a sympathetic tone. Oh, bechara, jaga nahi mila. So when a viewer reads it, or when a consumer of cinema, when a viewer, he receives such a coverage, do you think that something which is hailed or glorified would evoke much more excitement than something which is to be like empathized with? People would not probably have so much of respect towards that. Do you think that we really are undermining, or rather not giving enough respect to alternate voices in that sense?
See, I would read it in a very different way. I mean, what you are talking about glorifying comes from a certain way of covering cinema, which is very, very glamour and star oriented. Okay, so when you talk about glorifying, it's it's not coming from a position of being passionate about cinema. It's coming from a position of being a fan of that star face which represents that film. There's a crucial difference here, So I think what mismatch you're talking of comes from that. Because when you're talking about a mainstream film, there are obvious faces which can make you glorify and make things larger than life. At one level, the narrative itself is larger than life when it comes to most of the mainstream films. And when we look at the so-called off-mainstream movies, there isn't essentially a face you can sell the film by, then what do you sell it with? You sell it with the idea. So I think it's that. And my problem with the journalism right now, as we are in, what I said about the mainstream cinema, overt focus on it. B is also, it's very star driven. It's very star driven to the extent that I mean, it's again a very personal thing. I'm not casting judgment on anyone. I wouldn't want to pinpoint that X guy is like this or Y guy is like this. I feel uncomfortable taking selfies with stars. And I find, I mean, and it's not just a question of, film journalists, if you remember, at the time that, the PM got anointed as PM, I found political journalists taking selfies with him. I mean, as a journalist, I can't be a fan. You have to maintain a professional distance. This is the thing that you talk about, when you talk about the glorification, it somewhere comes from that deep down, that feeling.
So glad that you pointed it out. And I really hope and I wish that all film critics would somehow either directly or indirectly get to know about your opinion. Thank you so much.
No, I think it's fairly well known, Now in the times of social media, we all, by hook or crook, indirectly or directly, make a statement. I mean, I may be making a statement by not posting a selfie with a star.
Right.
And another one could be making a statement by posting a selfie with a star.
It's like countering stereotype and making a stereotype of its own.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So, moving on to my next question. You are currently in Mumbai. I hope it will not hurt you. Mumbai has become a power center of cinema.
Absolutely.
There is no problem in having a power center. But if there is one centralized power center in this country, which is so diverse and which has so many regional languages, is there not an injustice being done on independent filmmakers coming up in northeastern states or from Odisha or from Chhattisgarh who do not have access to the people like you or to the people who are extremely influential in taking their films to their viewers or to other platforms? So how could we counter that? How could we?
When you talk about the power center, I mean, forget about the independent cinema. It's a power center which is also affecting the mainstream cinema in other languages. Right there in Bombay, there is a flourishing Marathi film industry, which is not just about Umesh Kulkarni or Nagraj Manjule. It's also about hundreds and thousands of very, very mainstream, heavy on melodrama, comedy films, but even that is somewhere subjugated, by the, the overt force that Bollywood is, So it's not as though it's just the independent filmmakers or the so-called language cinemas which are suffering. I think it's the, Tamil industry, again, mainstream industry is very vibrant, very vivacious, perhaps able to break many laws within the popular narrative than even Bollywood is able to. But then it's very satisfied in its own zone, I think I would like to see it like, how Hollywood dominates mainstream in a global conscience. Now Bollywood seems to be kind of becoming...
Chota Bhai of Hollywood.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that the Chota Bhai of Hollywood could challenge, Hollywood in a market like China. I'm amazed. I was reading today about how much Amir's superstar, film has made. Secret Superstar has made in China. Mind-boggling figures. I was in Macau in December, and there was a film shown there called The Hunger, which is Bornila's film, which is made on the Shakespearean play, and very brutal film, very twisted relationships. So a Chinese journalist actually came up to me and asked that, are you sure this is an Indian film? So I was like, whatever makes you feel that way. So she says that, we've not been used to seeing this kind of Indian cinema. So do you realize that the danger of it is in a larger zone as well? China assumes Indian cinema is Three Idiots, it's PK, It's the
Completely
bung.
understand
It's
what
the
you're
bung.
saying.
It's the bung. So when they see something like the hunger, they are completely, she was completely zonked. You should have seen the expression on her face, So I had to really tell her, no, this kind of work is also being done in our country.
Thank you for saying that. I mean, I was completely in a state of shock when in 2015 I went to Cannes and I saw huge posters of Salman Khan inside the Palais, inside the premises, by a very big distribution house. It was, I don't know how shocking it was. But yeah, now coming to the next question, do you think it is a politics? It is a politics by Bollywood as an industry and by certain Bollywood stars to tag Bollywood as Indian cinema, and many journalists and many media did subscribe to that notion.
See,
Do you
again,
think so?
like I said, it's a gradual process. I remember there was a time, when we started talking about the NRI cinema. It all started with that, about how Karan is a big force in the UK and the US, and all of us wrote reams and reams about his films making money. Suddenly, I mean, this could be an interesting thing to look into, because ultimately anything mainstream is all about market. It's not about the aesthetics, it's about the market. And the global market started bringing in huge amounts of revenues. I think Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum was one film which really kind of set the ball rolling in terms of, suddenly the dollars kind of became like, multi-million, entity. And we suddenly started talking about till then I remember none of the magazines or newspaper used to talk about the business done by the film abroad. It would be CP Berar mein itna kiya, Delhi Punjab mein itna kiya, UP mein itna kiya, Bombay mein itna kiya. Nobody used to talk about that. Then came a time when films became super hits by the sheer virtue of doing well in markets abroad, which meant what? UK, US, Australia, Middle East, where there was a sizable population of the NRIs.
NRIs.
And slowly that narrative became the narrative of Bollywood
China
being the soft
and
power.
everywhere. Yeah.
Bollywood as a soft power suddenly came into focus. And I must say that, this was the time I was also traveling a bit abroad, and I do remember it was the Moscow Film Festival where I met a colleague of, a friend of mine from Romania, who was talking about how somebody like Shah Rukh is very big in Germany. And not just amongst the NRIs, Indians, but, the Germans. So, whether that was out of curiosity or whether there was a sustained engagement with, what he represented. But there have been pockets. Shah Rukh is big in Germany. Amir right now is huge in China. Amitabh has been huge in Egypt. So there are zones and zones and pockets. But this whole thing about Bollywood being turned into a soft power, I think, again, Lagan was another very crucial film which took this narrative forward. But I didn't see much, I've not seen much coming out of it. We keep talking about it, but it's not as though, our film have got, apart from a lunchbox. But then, do you consider Lunchbox a Bollywood film or not? I mean, there could be ways and ways of looking at it. You could call it more like an independent European film, because it did very well in the French and German circuits, and hence, and after that, you saw Ritesh kind of move and completely make films abroad. So apart from that film, we haven't really technically had a film which could really justify this statement that we have become, that Bollywood is the soft power. I really don't see that happening.
Okay. Ma'am, my next question is a sheer comparison between Indian cinema and world cinema. You have been in the jury of many film festivals, including Toronto, Cairo, Moscow. You have been at IFFK. You have compared, or you have rather seen Indian cinema alongside world cinema, the best of world cinema. Do you think that Indian cinema, wherever it's becoming popular, is being made special because it operates more at an emotional level than at an intellectual level?
Absolutely. I think it's the emotional core which is you're pressing the right buttons by kind of reaching out for that. And I can completely figure out why Three Idiots is such a big hit in China. Chinese are like us in the way, they kind of have this overt focus on, by heart learning, rote learning. And, a film that comes in challenges that they have the same population issues, they have the same, family emotional issues. So I can see how those emotional, buttons are being pushed by a film like that, very, very much true. But, that emotional excess can also be a distancing factor for a lot of people. I remember going to a film festival in Romania, Cluj. The creative director, we were together on a jury in Moscow, so he has kind of a lot of interest in Indian cinema. And he programmed a set of movies which was completely at odds with, what the mainstream perception of Indian films is. So he had Q's film Gandu, that time. Then there was Good Night, Good Morning, Sudhish Kamat's film. There's another very interesting film which called the Untitled Karthik Krishnan Project. So he had taken together these kind of films, and there were actually questions being asked to all the filmmakers and to me as to, and they were saying that they were not aware that this kind of stuff is also happening. So a lot of things is also to do with the fact that the awareness is not there, but I mean, now that you've posited the question, I mean, if you look at which films have done well over the past few years in an international circuit, Lunchbox again is a universal, loneliness, urban loneliness. It can work. It will work anywhere. You could place it in Paris and it will work. Masan, even though it is very much in, a UP, Banaras, but Banaras is again an entity perhaps people are familiar with. But again, it's a very human tale, It's a very human tale. I don't know whether I've seen an experimental film kind of catch on in a big way abroad. Let's see how Q's new film does in Berlin. Garbage. How it does, because that, Berlin's panorama section is very, very avant-garde. It has Kim Ki-duk in it also, and I've seen Garbage. It's kind of very, very, I mean...
Yeah, Q has to be like that.
No, it's a sledgehammer kind of film. He just kind of really takes on so many things. So I'm curious as to how that does. And one day how your film does, in international circuits. So let's see. But I mean, if one were to look at recent past, yes, what you're saying is right. It's basically conventional narratives, more affecting tales, and they could be set anywhere in a larger context.
Right. So you have already answered to what I was trying to say, that why doesn't avant-garde and extreme films like a Q's film or Kamal Swaroop's Om Dar Badar, which makes its place at Berlin or places like that, fails to connect to the Indian people?
I sometimes really wonder, because are they able to get the nuances, I mean, and I'm not talking just about this. Say a film like, say, Khosla Ka Ghosla. I don't know whether you've seen that film, which is about this whole real estate thing in Gurgaon. I really wonder that if you are from Orissa, would you also get the nuances of, because somewhere, where are we being particular and where are we being universal? That also comes to
You are saying that they are very rooted in their localized and they do not emerge as universal voices.
This is something I'm also grappling with. So it's more like a conversation than me giving answers to you. But sometimes I feel the more rooted you are, the more universal you become. And yet there are times when rootedness comes with its symbols, its metaphors, that may be very difficult for another culture to kind of, be able to grapple with. There are no answers. It's just a thought which I'm kind of saying aloud.
But the counter argument is that if a film like Gandu emerging from the Calcutta space, or if Om Dar Badar from Ajmer can appeal to the Berlin sensibilities, German sensibilities, how is it not appealing to maybe a Tamil sensibility or a Marathi sensibility or any other Indian sensibility?
Well, again, I think this is a lot to do with cine literacy also. I mean, I assume that a Berlin audience would be much more receptive of and educated in avant-garde than we are. It's not denigrating any one of us. We have grown up with a very mainstream culture. Do we have cinema as part of our education? Tomorrow, if I were to suggest, that maybe 6th standard onwards, we should have a module, a course on film appreciation in schools. Would parents agree? Would the teachers agree? I really doubt it, because conventionally also we have been seeing cinema in a certain zone. Forget about. Let me give you my example. The fact that I am a film critic in my extended family is something of an aberration. And still to date, the older uncles of mine would wonder, what is this job you're doing? Watching films and writing about them, what's the big deal? So it's a mindset. We've all faced it, and we've all broken it and kind of taken it one step forward at a time. It's not going to happen overnight.
But we hope that we do progress in
We
this.
do, and the thing is, somewhere I feel with the online zone, there's a certain literacy which is also spreading. Again, it's a zone which I am very ambiguous about, because at one level, when we talk about the mainstream cinema and how media reacts to it, when I got onto the social media platform some 8 years ago, Twitter, let's not talk about Facebook, because that's like we are such a happy family zone. But when we talk about Twitter, there were many, many interesting, offbeat, under the radar films that I discovered through Twitter. A film like Srinivas's film, Untitled Karthik Krishnan Project, I had no clue about till, because I was following a lot of people and they started talking about how this guy has made a film with just $40,000, So, then I saw that and I reached out to him. I said, boss, I want to watch your film, So, if I were in a space where this didn't exist, I would not have been able to, kind of reach out to the guy. So at one level, I saw a lot of interesting offbeat stuff coming my way through this alternate media. Now when I go to Twitter, I realize it's nothing but Friday ka jo film release ho raha hai. Oh, he has said it's so good. Oh, she has said it's so good. It's becoming another marketing platform.
Yes.
What was so good about that medium is now completely getting taken over by whether this video has gone viral or not, whether this film's, the first look has gone viral or not, and something which could have bloomed beautifully into this, alternate zone to create awareness about New Age cinema, is completely fallen by the wayside now.
This
It's
is
a
the
pity.
problem
It's a
with
real
the, yeah.
pity.
This is the problem with the industry, that they will creep into every possible space. If you have noticed recently, many out and out industry filmmakers call themselves independent filmmakers, because it has become a new fashionable word in the world market.
So independent cinema, again, people have not been able to put a definition to it. Merely because you do an offbeat subject, do you become independent? No. Independent comes from your model of financing, your model of exhibition. Anurag Kashyap, when he made a certain film, would have been independent. But to now talk of him as an independent filmmaker is ridiculous.
Absolutely.
Is ridiculous.
And I hope that you will tell him one
No,
day.
I've already, we ourselves talk about it. In fact, in an article, I'd mentioned him as, being the Yashraj of, off-skirt kind of, off-tilted kind of cinema. See, I'm not taking away the merit from him in terms of giving space to so many young filmmakers. I don't think there has been a single person, like him. There was a time when RGV was like that. He nurtured so much of talent. After that came Anurag, and he nurtured so much of talent. So he has, but he's not independent. He's a studio unto himself.
Absolutely.
And I'm not denigrating it at all. In fact, it's very good, because now Kanu got to make Titli because Dibakar was there. So, there are ways that these filmmakers are also
They are helping
mentoring,
out, right.
mentoring a whole new generation of filmmakers. But let's look at them as mentors for a new voice to come in. Independent cinema is a very different entity. I don't know whether we've had independent cinema at all or not.
I so much love you for this statement. Absolutely true.
So that's it's a very it needs to be seen in perspective, and this is not to denigrate A or Z or B, but just to kind of look at it from that zone. To me, Untitled Karthik Krishnan project would be independent because here's somebody who's taking $40,000 of his own and कहीं से कैमरा दोस्तों को कहा आ जाओ शाम को बैठते हैं स्टूडियो में एंड स्टूडियो भी नहीं किसी के घर में जाके यू आर शूटिंग that is the way independent cinema happens.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So probably because we have time limit, we'll limit to the last question and then open up to a few audience questions. So the last question, which probably many of us will be eager to know from you. In a state like Odisha, much like many other neglected states of India, do you think that film criticism, which is absent here, would play a very, very important and a strategic role in shaping up the regional cinema culture in future?
Well, I was quite zapped when you told me that it's almost negligent here because, I assume that again, it's kind of comes from my blinkers on approach, but even I'm from the north, so, when you travel to UP, you go to small towns, whether it is you pick up a Dainik Bhaskar or a Dainik Jagran or an Amar Ujala, everywhere, there is a defined space, and it's a very well-guarded space. What I need to know from you is that do the local newspapers here don't have zones at all?
It's insignificant. Even if they have, it's insignificant, and there are no film reviews done of any Odia film.
Okay, so this is again another interesting thing because I don't know what to say, whether it's the egg or the chicken, what came first, You could look at it, one way of holding the argument would be that if there was sustained good writing about cinema, maybe people would become curious and go for movies. The other argument could be, Arey Baba, film hi nahi hai, so what do we write about, My thing would be that, I'm now thinking about the article that I'm going to write.
How do you draw parallels with the Northeast? How do you draw parallel? Because Northeast, in the last couple of years, they have come up with a lot of good filmmakers and films.
They've come up with a lot of good films, which could also be, the more pressures you put.
I understand what you're saying. You're saying the other way around. It could have been the other way around.
The other thing is that, at least to me, my exposure to Northeast cinema has happened a lot through journalists from the Northeast, Utpal Borpujari used to work in Deccan Chronicle and other papers, and, the only way one can get, and it's a beautiful way to get to, know about cinema in this country is that, as a community, when we look at journalists, there are journalists from all over, so he was the one person I used to go to, and he would tell me, okay, this is happening, watch this one out, watch this one out. And once you slowly start networking, then filmmakers also start telling you, you watch a film like a film called Yarong. I remember I was at that time on the, Indian Panorama Selection Committee, and there was this film made by a priest in Kerala who was in Arunachal Pradesh, and he made a film in a dialect called Kokborok. And it was like, it came, the initial curiosity came through this whole exotic thing. Yaar, ye Kokborok kya hai? And, this whole, a priest making a film, that too from Kerala going to the Northeast. So, there are things which tickle your curiosity and then you go one step at a time. But, so for me, Northeast cinema has come a lot through that. Now, when it comes to Oriya cinema, maybe I've not been in touch with writers from the area. Maybe I've not gotten in touch with filmmakers from the region. There's always a first step towards that. So I'm here for the festival. And like I was telling you, for me, it's not just about coming here and talking to you and watching films, because a lot of them I may have already watched. But now that I'm here, I'll talk to you. You'll put me in touch with other people. And I just hope that there will be a communication channel. So tomorrow, if another new voice comes and you spot him, you will tell me to, it's a question of where you make the start. I think in Orissa that one start has not been made. Once that gets done, then it's a ripple effect.
Absolutely.
And
we hope this could be the start.
Yeah, and the thing is that, but it's also unfair if you compare the entire Northeast to Orissa, because let's also be fair and let's all be fair and realize that Northeast cinema is not one entity. There is Sikkim, there is Mizoram, there is Manipur, and lot of a time that whole one monolith, is considered what there is to the place. So, Orissa is like one Manipur. Orissa is not,
Yes.
Even there, Assamese films have been the dominant force. And now, if you find a lot of, even within that region, there are challenges coming from various other language kind of cinema. So I think it's too much to, it'll happen by and by. It's just that I think Orissa filmmakers should try and get together, network, try and make your films reach out. One thing I really, really want to say from this platform is that subtitling is very essential. Lots of times we as a journalist don't know what the hell is happening in our own backyards, but we know the latest film in Europe which is doing the rounds and getting appreciated. Why? Because it comes with the subtitles. And it's not just you or anyone else, it's across. I mean, it's only now that the mainstream Tamil cinemas, has started releasing films in Bombay with subtitles. It's very crucial, to cross over. And I think somewhere you need to also try and court the online platforms. It's not going to be easy because they again are intent on telling you that Dabang did this many numbers and Three Idiots did this much numbers. But, today I can go to Netflix and see a Tamil film I may have missed out earlier. So I think that kind of a networking also needs to happen.
Absolutely. So we are almost time. We have crossed the time. So rather we'll open up to the audience for a few questions. So, guys.
Yeah, it's not really a question as such, but then I would like to have an open-ended conversation with both of you, in a sense.
What's your name?
My name is Abhishek. You took a class of mine at Film Appreciation course, Pune.
Yeah, of course. I was wondering when I saw you
Yeah.
that your face looked very familiar. That's
When Amartya mentioned that Indian cinema doesn't approaches to people outside because of an emotional resonance that they have rather than an intellectual resonance. So I would just like to know that how do you distinguish, how does that distinction comes through? Because I think both kinds of cinema, if you're really going to distinguish between the both of them, have their own cons and pros. So yeah, I would like that distinction.
And emotions can exist with intellect also.
Absolutely, that is my point, because when I watch a film like Pathir Panchali or when I watch a Megha Dhakatara, it's extremely emotional and intellectual as well at the same time. So of course there's a certain kind of exploitation of one aspect outside, but then there also has been exploitation of the other aspect. We know of slow art films which doesn't really have anything to say, but then imposedly try to be an art house film. That is also equally bad.
I think I tend to kind of see a point in his thing also, because as a journalist, again, before you kind of take over, I just find it also becoming a big thing which I completely fight against, is this, some young filmmaker would come and expect me to write glorious things about him or her, saying that maine itne paise mein banai and it's independent. But, we also have a term nowadays, a very pejorative term, which we use, that bhindi in the name of indie, any and everything is, just because it's good cinema is good cinema, let's put it that.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. With the digital technology, this is one of the demerits of digital technology, that because camera has become like a pen, So every monkey has become a photographer and everyone has become a film.
No, that's what the
filmmaker.
democratization of medium, democratization of the film medium we speak about. And it's a question not just about film or photography, even journalism. You have a concept of citizen journalists. You have blogs where people are opinionating. Many a times the opinion don't come back with enough facts, there is no rigor. So it's a two-way process. There will be
Right.
good out of it also, and there will be
Right.
bad coming out of it.
Right. And to kind of justify your statement, of course, an emotion and intellect can go hand in hand. Uh, my objective is which one triggers the other. Sometimes it operates at an intellectual level, and once you decipher it intellectually, you get the emotional high, or the catharsis happens. The other is out and out operating on the surface at an emotional level, and only when you dig deep into it, you understand the intellectual intricacies of it. So when I make the difference, I'm just trying to make it of course, in every cinema, there has to be an intellectual side to it, there has to be an emotional side to it, otherwise a brain and a heart must connect. There must be a connect. It cannot be disconnected.
And I think when he mentions emotions, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, it's also, the aesthetic of it. I mean, if it's a highly, melodramatic and
Dramatized and may not be just be in
excessive way of
right.
putting it, maybe that could be the,
It could be.
I mean, even a Haneke makes very intellectual films, but there is always an emotional core running through it. I mean, Amor is, what else if it's not, emotions? And many people have had issues with that also. But then he has an intellectual side to his emotions as well.
So any other questions? Anyone?
Amartya, due to lack of time, we can wind it up.
Okay then. So, okay, here's okay. So thank you so much, Namrata, and I would